A great joke is like a poem. Writing a good one is hard, but they're also better than poems in some ways. I mean, you don't need an MFA to laugh, usually. One concept that can really help make your jokes work is two stories. Now we're going deep into the weeds here, gang, so prepare your bodies. By two stories, I mean Greg Dean's approach to joke writing from his book Step by Step to Stand-Up Comedy. To paraphrase, a joke needs two stories, no more, no less. There's the story the setup tells, and then the story the punchline reveals was there all along. If you grok this, you will be able to write a joke on any topic, and you'll be able to spot what is wrong with a lot of jokes that aren't working. And you'll also be able to expand parts of a working joke so that they still work, but include some more elements like callbacks. Let's look at some pro-level jokes. We'll take them apart, show why they work, and then add stuff to make them not work so that we can learn to recognize that too. First up, Wanda Sykes from her special, I'm an Entertainer.
There's some things that I miss about being in the lockdown. I do. Right? And remember, we wouldn't let anybody in your house. Remember that? You ain't let nobody in your house. And I miss that because it was fun telling my white friends to go around back.
Sykes starts by telling us a story we understand. It's the COVID lockdown. Nobody's allowed in your house. This is the setup, and it's telling us the first story. Then the punch tells us the story that was there all along. Sykes enjoyed telling her white friends to go around back. In order to get this joke at a conversant level, you need to know that there was a time when Black Americans were not welcome at the front door of a white person's house. Sykes is drawing a parallel between that history and telling her white friends to go around back to hang out in the open air of the backyard during COVID. The two stories here, reduced to their essentials, are, I missed the part of COVID when we didn't let anyone into our house. It was fun telling our white friends to go around back. Do you see how the first story, the COVID lockdown, is kind of smaller in terms of length of time and in terms of magnitude? And then the second story is a much bigger concept, ongoing race relations in the US stretching back to the formation of the country. Sykes is dealing with a slightly complicated first story here. There are two components. I missed some parts of COVID and we didn't let anyone into our house. So she uses repetition to make sure she drives both components home. The way that we can tell that she's a master at this is we barely even notice the repetition when she's doing it. Watch how she varies her cadence and her word choice. She says concept one, then concept two, then concept two again, then concept one again. It's almost like a poem with an ABBA rhyming scheme, except it's a conceptual rhyme rather than a phonetic one.
There's some things that I miss about being in the lockdown. I do. Right? And remember, we wouldn't let anybody in your house. Remember that? You ain't let nobody in your house. And I miss that because it was fun telling my white friends to go around back.
Isn't that great? I bet you didn't even notice that she was doing that when you saw the joke the first time. That's how good she is. What if we add an extra concept? It will dilute the joke. Watch. I miss a few things about the COVID lockdown. I got way into buying things on eBay, but we didn't let anyone in our house. Remember that? We didn't let anyone in our house, and I miss that because I enjoyed telling my white friends to go around back. See how adding that eBay part is distracting? Now maybe it's true, maybe it's what you think about when you think about COVID, but it's too many stories. It needs to be cut. Next up, another classic. This is Hannibal Burress. Watch how he uses his cadence and repetition to sell the first story. He speaks faster on the setup, varying his cadence again, like a poem, and then when he gets to the punch, it's much slower and more deliberate.
I have a situation in my apartment right now. I have a surplus of pickle juice in my apartment. Too much pickle juice, because after the pickles are gone, I don't like throwing out the pickle juice. It just feels wasteful. So lately I've been dipping my fingers in the pickle juice and I flick it on my sandwiches for flavor like that.
See that? I have too much pickle juice in my apartment, so I flick it on my sandwiches. Two stories. What if he said, I have a problem in my apartment right now? Well, actually, there are a lot of problems, like the rent is too high, but my biggest problem is too much pickle juice, so I flick it on my sandwiches. See how that wanders? You can still develop the idea through tags and other jokes if you want to, but keep the core of every thought streamlined. When you get good at the two stories, you can add layers. For example, let's look at Marc Maron from his latest special, Bleak to Dark.
I don't want to be negative, but I don't think anything's ever going to get better ever again.
The two stories are, I don't want to be negative, and I don't think anything is ever going to get better ever again. Maron tells the first story, and then he pauses and gets a laugh without a punch, because the first story of his opening joke is a punch to an unstated, I know I look like. That's what I mean by layers. Let me back up a second. An I know I look like is a joke that you tell, usually at the top of your set, to call out to the audience the way that you appear. When you're relatively unknown, especially if your appearance or delivery is remarkable, an I know I look like will serve you well to build rapport. Think about Daniel Simonson talking about being Norwegian.
Yeah. From Norway.
This is Henry Cho on the Jay Leno Tonight Show from 1992 with maybe one of the greatest I know I look likes of all time.
All right, thanks. Howdy. How y'all doing? Yeah, I know what may be going through your mind right now. Just let it soak in a second or two.
Okay, so we know what an I know I look like is. Maron is layering the I know I look like to get a laugh out of the first story of his opening joke. He's making story 1 of the opening joke into story 2 of something he didn't say. Everyone who knows him knows he's negative, so when he says the first story, he holds for the laugh.
I don't want to be negative, but I don't think anything's ever going to get better ever again.
Once you get the basic bones of the joke, the 2 stories, you can start layering like this. Story 1 could work for the joke that you're in the middle of, but also be a callback to a previous joke. It will become like a symphony with jokes rising and subsiding all over the place. And no, you won't have to think about this stuff all the time. It will become second nature. But also, once it's in your brain, if you encounter something that's not working, you'll be able to dismantle it easily.
Hey, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this, like and subscribe, and maybe jump on the Patreon if you want to help me make more. And if you want to talk about comedy writing with people who are trying to do it in a constructive way, we also have a Discord channel.